Oh, Sarah, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, cool. All right. That was great.
It seems as if we're entering into an era in which, without the intervention of the old, without the intervention of that which is considered ancient, we run the risk of bumping into irrecoverable catastrophe. It comes a time when the word modern has very little of power. And we have to wonder how much of these still need to forget before it's too late. In the village, it is understood that any kind of challenge that you face in the now is connected with a power source that once was one pillar of your own power, that you made a contract with, you made a deal with. Basically saying that I'm going to cross over to this dimension where, in order to exist there, I have to carry a physical body. But I've heard rumors that there are problems associated with having a body. And those rumors are not all good. And I'm worried about the ones that are not good. Namely that you forget what the source of your true power is. I'm coming into this world because I have a gift, the gift of healing to bring. But in order for me to be able to deliver that gift, I need these sources of power to keep my back protected. the energy that we have inside of us to dispense or to administer is proportional to the amount of energy it takes to deliver the gift that we brought with us into this world. So if some of that energy, as it is, unfortunately, seeming like it's the case, if most of that energy is invested fighting against adversity, uh, wrestling with challenges, eventually, by the time the challenges are through with you, the energy indicator look really low, and the gift is still sitting there, waiting to be delivered.
Greetings, greetings. Also good to see all those faces. Greetings and blessings to everyone. Brother Malodoma reminded us of our, dare I use one of our favorite UU words, inherent. Our inherent gifts. And that we were born with gifts to share with one another. So in that spirit, if you have a chalice, I'd ask you to put your hands on it at this time. I'm going to light this one for our gathering today. All things under the umbrella of the UU chalice. So with the rekindling of this flame, let us recommit ourselves to accept life's gifts, namely the gifts of grace and of gratitude, and to use these gifts to bless the world in a spirit of love. May it be so. So again, greetings and welcome. I want to welcome you in the name of the ancestors upon whose shoulders I stand. All those I know, those I do not know, and those who know me better than I know myself. Yes. Alice Walker says to acknowledge our ancestors simply means we are aware that we did not make ourselves. Dare I say, contrary to that phrase that burns my ears every time I hear it, self-made man, woman, or child. No such thing. That we did not make ourselves, that in fact the line stretches all the way back, perhaps all the way to God, or gods, or goddesses. We remember them because it is easy to forget that we are not the first. We are not the first to suffer, to fight, to rebel, to love, and to die. The grace with which we embrace life in spite of the suffering, the grace with which we embrace life in spite of the suffering is always of measure of what has gone before. We also want to stand loud, out loud, and on purpose in honoring the original inhabitants of this land. I challenge folks to be able to name at least 5 of them in your own head. The Shoshone, the Cherokee, the Wiyot, the Karuk, the Chumash, the Cree, the Navajo, the Hopi. There were 500 nations of people. So we give honor to that. So whatever land we're on now, we honor that piece for sure. So again, good to see these faces. You could be anywhere and you chose to be here. And for that, we are grateful. So I want to take a couple of things and throw them away. The idea of perfection. I want to put that in my little cup and throw that over my left so we let that go. The other one is that concept of time. Throw that one away too. For us, perfection, no, time relative. I'm reminded of the old story of the American and the African walking down a country road. They're approaching each other. The old African's walking down, he sees the young American coming. He says, hi, he says, In Africa, we kill time. In America, time kill you. So please know that all beliefs and non-beliefs are welcome in this circle. As my siblings in Dublin, Ireland remind us, we do not ask what you believe or expect you to think the way we do, but only that you try and live a kind and a helpful life with the dignity proper to that of a human being. Welcome all who believe that religion is wider, dare I say wider than any sect, and deeper than any set of opinions, including my own. So welcome all who might find strength in our gathering today, strength and encouragement for daily living. Yes, or as I like to add, because it don't mean a thing if it ain't got that swing. So hopefully today you're going to pick up on a thing or two that is useful. As I said, it's got that swing. So in that spirit, I'm asking y'all to join me in something. Everybody's got a right hand. I ask you to put it over your heart, if you would, please. Thank you so much. And hit it a couple times like that heartbeat. Yeah, keep that going, please. The heartbeat together. All the souls and faces that are here. The message is, there is only one world. The world of the heart. There is only one nation. The nation of the heart. There's really only one people. People of the heart. There's only one gender. The gender of the heart. There's only one race. The race of the heart. And may this heartbeat be our partner on our little journey, on our big journey today. Yes, indeed. Thank you all. Thanks. Oh, let me take a good look at these faces and ask y'all to take a look around too on our magnificent Zoom screen. Most of y'all know each other, but I'm just getting to see y'all, and for this I am grateful. So welcome all. So y'all saw a little opening video that might have featured somebody what you might refer to as a shaman. Hey, yeah. Well, I think we have shamans in our culture. We just call them by another name. We call them quantum physicists. That resonates more for some reason. My favorite shaman or quantum physicist said this. He said that the intuitive mind is a sacred gift. The rational mind is a faithful servant. The intuitive mind is a sacred gift. And the rational mind is a faithful servant. That shaman's name is Albert Einstein. So I always ask us and ask myself, do we live in a society that honors the servant and has forgotten the sacred gift? Have we forgotten the power? Here's our UU word again. Have we forgotten that power inherent in the sacred gift of the feeling mind, the intuitive mind? They say it lives in the heart. So are we serving the rational mind at this critical time? At this critical time. So here in MultiKulti, we say, I gotta warn you, and this is a graceful, smiling, big old hugging one. It's not a safe space. It's a brave space that is open to all. And we realize that uncomfortable is okay. It's okay. That's how diamonds are formed, someone once told me. This is a space where we can breathe and expand, we can cry, we can laugh, dance if you feel like it, and sing in the middle of this time of turmoil. So I'm gonna ask Sarah to pull up some slides for us now. I want to introduce you to some terms. We'll talk a little bit about the rational mind. Some terms I want us to come to terms with. You've probably heard them bantered about. They're nothing new. And MultiKulti. So where are we coming from? We talked about that at the beginning of our opening, that we call upon the ancestors, those who've come before us. And I offer to my friends out there who have not went down that trail, take a peek. Or as we say in Mississippi, which where I'm coming from, they want to know first thing, who are you? Now, I don't want to know if you're an accountant or what you do, but who are your people? Or if it's okay with you, I'm going to say it how they say it down here. Who your people is? Who's your mama and your daddy? And who's their mama and who's their daddy? That's how we know about you. Because we know that you come from some people. And a lot of folks I meet, they say, well, I'm an American. That's my culture. I say, where's your granddaddy from? So keep calm and call upon your ancestors. Black Elk reminds us that the first piece, which is the most important, is that which comes within the souls of people when they realize their relationship. And folks, that begins inside of each of us. And there's a gracious lady who summed it up pretty well, that last little piece on that MultiKulti slide, which hopefully will reveal itself shortly. But this one you know already. It's the one and only Margaret Mead quote. Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, 'tis the only thing that ever has. Next slide, please. Now, this one is our foundation. And it may be contradictory to a lot of the things I always kid people and say, we're based upon the words of the Lord. In this case, Audre Lorde. Audre reminds us, and I quote, it is not our differences that divide us. Contrary to popular belief, it is not our differences that divide us. It is our inability to recognize, to accept, and to celebrate those differences. The analogy I use, we know about the melting pot. And I offer, no, try a salad. A salad. A tomato's a tomato. A radish is a radish. That cucumber ain't gonna change. Let it be a cucumber. But when we bring all those together, put it on a bed of lettuce, in our case, a bed of understanding, or you can beat it with a stick. The differences are recognized, accepted, and hopefully, which is our goal, to celebrate the differences. And that key word I show you there is inability, which speaks to me that we can somehow become more able. We can minimize that inability to recognize, to accept, and celebrate our differences. Next slide, please. We hear talk a lot about classism and sexism and racism. So what is an ism? What is an ism? Here's an offering. An ism is not bad behavior, by the way. An ism is the exercise of power. We're talking about power. An ism is the exercise of power over a group of people. And here's the big key. Over a historically long, dare I say, long period of time, based primarily upon race, gender, or class. So if I don't like white folks, or you don't like men, or you don't like women, that's bad behavior. I have a technical term for that. It's called an a-hole. That's not it. We're talking about power over a group based on race, class, and gender over a very long, historically long period of time. That is an ism. Next slide, please. Yeah, not bad behavior. Multiculturalism, that's the work we're doing. Here's an offering for you. The process of recognizing, accepting, and celebrating whose culture? Your own. Your own. The party begins with you. Recognize, accepting, and celebrating your own culture, as well as the culture of others. Because that's where it begins. What is your culture? Or as I said earlier, who are your people? You're not self-made. Where grandma and them come from? We have a real technical term for it in our culture. We call it DNA. But multiculturalism stresses learning to appreciate the impact of differences in social locations. There's that word, that intersectionality piece, yeah? Race, gender and class, sexual orientation, religion, physical ability, and language. Language. Let me digress a quick story. Language, the power of language. I was in Las Vegas in a steam room full of men. I'll never forget the story. And a man came in and he had one of the most beautiful accents I had ever heard, because I like language, I love words. And I asked him, what country was he from? And he said, I'm from the most powerful country on earth. And I said, you're not from America. So wait a minute, what do you mean? He said, I'm from the most powerful country on earth. And I said, man, it sounds kind of South African accent. I said, I give, where are you from? And he said, I am from England. Huh. And I said, well, why is that the most powerful country on earth? And he said, without missing a beat, What language are you speaking? I'll never forget, he froze me. That's how we see the world. What language are you speaking? Next slide, please. I think that's the last one for today. Yeah. Well, I think I got a video for you. Speaking of multicultural, take a look at this 3-minute clip here. Yeah.
Police still are making arrests in the violent attack on the U.S. Capitol that unfolded 2 weeks ago. They include a man from Maryland accused of beating officers with a bat. WJZ investigator Mike Elgren is live in Baltimore to show us the evidence. Mike.
Vic, the federal government released surveillance images of that Maryland suspect holding the bat, storming the Capitol. That suspect said in an online video the day of the riots that he was not there because of Mr. Trump. Emmanuel Jackson is one of the latest Marylanders charged in connection with the riot at the U.S. Capitol. Federal prosecutors say he was one of the first to enter the building and repeatedly struck police officers with a metal baseball bat. Jackson from Prince George's County turned himself in to police. He explained why he was there in a video posted to Twitter.
We've been taken over by globalists, by the Chinese, by America. I'm not here for Trump. I'm here for America.
Police officers have described the harrowing attacks they faced that day.
You can see the guy reaching up to grab my gas mask, just sort of beating my head against the door and ripping it away. He was also able to rip away my baton and hit me in the head with it. So, I definitely considered that might be it. I might not be able to make it out of there.
The FBI continues to search for more rioters. The agency tracked Brian Bettenker, who was on probation for a Baltimore County burglary case, to the Capitol using his GPS ankle monitor. The self-professed white supremacist told his probation agent he was in D.C. to distribute Bibles. He posed with the Confederate flag and wore a Proud Boys t-shirt and flashed the white power hand gesture.
We have to take these right-wing extremist groups, these white supremacist groups, much more seriously.
Now, that officer you just heard from who was crushed in the door, the FBI announced that they have also made an arrest in that case, a man from Connecticut. His childhood friend turned him in by calling the FBI tip line. Reporting live in Baltimore, Mike Elgren, WJZ.
Yes, indeed. This time of tumult, historically like no other time. That was a multiculti moment there for a lot of us in terms of who was there. The insurrection. As I mentioned, I love words. Insurrection is kind of like resurrection. I'm wondering how that one might lead to the other is my hope. But this time of pandemic, this economic, racial, and gender turmoil and call for equity, a call and an insistence upon equity, calling out white supremacy and patriarchy and gender bias, which in my judgment has passed as normal and normalcy for way too long. Now I'm just kind of calling for what I call UI, U.I. Unconditional inclusion. And I remind those who are so concerned, this is not about subtraction. This is no takeaway action. You're not going to lose anything. This is about addition, a building on condition. No subtraction, no takeaway action. More, not less. So I remind y'all that I'm not an expert, but consider myself an explorer and willing to take this journey with you. So can we continue to explore together? Oh yeah, is that okay? I was going to ask you if y'all could show some hands there, if y'all know how to do that stuff, yeah, or that other magic little journey, which reminds me that the juice is what's most important to me, and the juice is inside of you. Meaning, if something comes up that you need to put out, guess what? I want to hear that. So that's the juice. And I'll shut my big mouth up. I want to hear that juice. So don't be shy. Say, hey, hey, Rudolph, slow down. I got something. I got something. That's important. That's the juice. It don't mean a thing if it ain't got that swing. Something comes up you don't like, or you just love, or whatever it is, say it. That don't cheat us, because believe me, I'd be hurt. I may never see you again, but no, I'm hurt. That's
the question in the chat for you.
Yes.
I don't know if you saw it. Did you see my question?
No, please. That's great. No, somebody, I'm not a, hopefully, yeah. Thank you for volunteering that chat stuff.
This is XK, and I can read it to you. The question I had is, does multiculturalism fall into the category of isms? Is it a form of exercising power?
Well, multiculturalism is, answer your own thing. If by our definition of ism, it would not qualify, because it is not exercising. It is, what's the word I'm gonna say, when you pull the cover off something, and it's not based on race, class, and gender or power over. It is a recognition of existing power, would be my response to that.
Okay.
Even though some people might want to categorize that, this is a judgment, those who, again, feel they're losing something.
Well, here in
They
Las
want to put
Cruces, there's a big,
code on.
here in Las Cruces, there's a big movement afoot to stop multiculturalism in the school district. And
Oh, yes, sure.
they have a proposal to implement inclusion, equity, and multiculturalism in the curricula. And they had a big, what I understand was almost a fist fight at the school board meeting for people who were against it and
Sure.
felt that it was a force of power over them that was unwanted.
Yeah.
And I imagine in our congregation, there are
Understood.
people who might say the same thing, that multiculturalism or the move afoot in the congregation to teach and spread the news or good news of multiculturalism and inclusion could be an overreach of power by those who are supporting it.
And I would dare say those same folks would be in agreement for the concept that I know you use a lot, and that's the beloved community. This is the price to pay to get there. A journey to create a truly multiracial society. I want to ask, can I get a volunteer? Because this whole, I think for me, it's all about that race, that social construct. If someone volunteers to look up a man's name, if you don't all the way, his name is Johann Friedrich Blumenbach. I saw my note taker, Carol Winkler. Carol, I'm calling you out, Carol. Excuse me, how you doing?
You're muted, Carol.
Okay, sorry.
Hi, Carol.
Hi.
See, I have an unwritten rule, and you'll have to excuse me. See, if people don't volunteer, I volunteer them. And I saw you studiously taking notes on, this is something you can accept or not, because I don't know if you've got that Google Wikipedia access, but the man's name is Johann, Johannn, Friedrich, Friedrich, and everybody should look him up, Blumenbach, Blumenbach, one of the guideposts. And then we'll talk about that after we have our lunch break. And you reminding me, I'll have an elder moment I won't forget. But please remind me about, hey, we wanted to talk about who was that guy, okay? And I think that'll.
Back again, please.
BLUMEN BACH.
Okay, got it.
And I think Friedrich Blumenbach, I think that'll shed some light on where we're going.
Okay.
Ed
We are.
DeBookie already looked it up and put the link in the chat.
So that backs to the title. It took me a long time to come up with this multiculti. What do we say? Removing unconscious bias. I used to say debris. I'm gonna use y'all guinea pigs. Removing unconscious debris from the soil of the soul, or removing unconscious bias from the soil of the soul. How many people like debris? Not that it matters. And I changed it to bias. I like debris, bias. But one or the other. The key word that I offer is removing. The 3 letters are ing. This is a process. This is an ongoing activity of removing, because this is something we all caught, we all were taught, and we all bought to some degree or another. So you're not alone. We have to understand, I always say, cut yourself some slack. And I honor you for even showing up to do the work. Miss Maggie, I see a hand there. Can you unmute yourself?
Yes, sir. I just was thinking that I like debris because it does connote that it's left over. And I think when you become, I know when I become aware of my biases, and they bring up shame and stuff, it's like a BB that was shot into you. And it's like it's there, it's part of you, but it's like not something that you feel like you own, but it is in you. And that's why I like the word debris, because
Thank you.
it gives that sense of something left over.
Yes. And thank you, Maggie, beautiful. And a teaching moment. Please remember what Maggie said. And I want to offer one of the things I want you to away from here today, if nothing else. And that's the concept of both and. Because Maggie said, which I'm going to steal, Maggie, with your permission. It's like a BB that shot into us. That is so beautiful. And then you said, but, and then you went on. My only offering is to take that word but out and put in the word and. And. So in addition to this isms and stuff, we also suffer from, and this is a judgment, what I call the Cartesian mind. The Cartesian mind is the either or mind. It has to be one way or another. That is the, dare I say, the unindigenous mind, the separated mind. That guy comes up again, my favorite shaman Einstein said, that is the greatest delusion that all of us Western people suffer from. He said, our greatest delusion is that we think we're separate from nature. So thank you, Maggie, for that. Removing that unconscious debris is our goal, because we want what we call that a truly multiracial, multi-ethnic, multi-religious, multi-gender democracy, which I offer has never existed on the planet. This ain't no lightweight undertaking we're trying here. We can see what's happening in the Holy Land, in Poland, in rich land, your land and my land. That old thing about I'm better than you and you ain't got room for you, all that. What we are attempting and running our mouths about, so Reverend XK, I would say board members and congregants being a little upset about what's happening is par for the course. I accept it, I welcome it. This is uncomfortable work. We're shaking the boat you came in on. We're shaking the boat. This is a new story. We're creating a new story. The story that says you're no better than I, but I'll never forget that. I am no better than you. In fact, if we get to the point that we realize that there really is no separation, I don't know Maggie, but there's no separation between Maggie and I. As the South Africans say, I only exist because of Maggie. They have a word for it. Again, that's back to that language. They have a word for it. They call it Ubuntu. Ubuntu. I am because you are. And that's to me the essence of MultiKulti, looking at how other people, other languages, other histories, other times, or as our opening video talked about, ancient. I'm big on ancient. Ain't nothing new under the sun. We have simply forgotten what's in our DNA. We've forgotten. We've been told new, new, new. It's all about new, new. Now, I love new stuff, but it ain't all about new. So they truly that most, and we said we're going to build that multicultural piece from the soil, from the soil. Now we have some particular soil that we're working with, and I'll ask Sarah if she can play that Eddie Glaude video that speaks to the soil where we find ourselves. And I may go a little bit past 12 if y'all don't beat me up before we take a break. So we'll play, take a look at this clip, please.
As a country, we're not unique in our evils, to be honest with you.
Professor Glaude.
I think where we may be singular is our refusal to acknowledge them. And the legends and myths we tell about our inherent, goodness to hide and cover and conceal so that we can maintain a kind of willful ignorance that protects our innocence. See, the thing is that when the Tea Party was happening, we were saying, pundits, oh, it's just about economic populism. It's not about race. When people knew, social scientists were already writing that what was driving the Tea Party were anxieties about demographic shifts, that the country was changing, that they were seeing these racially ambiguous babies on Cheerios commercials, that the country wasn't quite feeling like it was a white nation anymore. And people were screaming from the top of their lungs, yo, this is not just simply economic populism. This is the ugly underbelly of the country. See, the thing is this, and I'll say this and I'll take the hit on it. There are communities that have had to bear the brunt of America confronting, white Americans confronting the danger of their innocence. And it happens every generation. So somehow we have to kind of, oh my God, is this who we are? And just again, here's another generation of babies. Think about it, that 2-year-old had his bones broken by 2 parents trying to shield him from being killed. A woman who has been married to this man for as long as I've been on the planet almost, lost her husband. For what? And so what we know is that the country has been playing politics for a long time on this hatred. We know this. So it's easy for us to place it all on Donald Trump's shoulders. It's easy for us to place Pittsburgh on his shoulders. It's easy for me to place Charlottesville on his shoulders. It's easy for us to place El Paso on his shoulders. This is us. And if we're going to get past this, we can't blame it on him. He's a manifestation of the ugliness that's in us. I've had the privilege of growing up in a tradition that didn't believe in the myths and the legends because we had to bear the brunt of them. Either we're going to change, Nicole, or we're going to do this again and again, and babies are going to have to grow up without mothers and fathers, uncles and aunts, friends, while we're trying to convince white folk to finally leave behind a history that will maybe, or embrace a history that might set them free from being white. Finally.
So that's the question we're sitting with, I believe, right now at this place in time. Removing unconscious debris from the soil. That's the soil. The last piece is of my time is of the soul, because I think that's maybe dare I use the word salvation. Emerson called soul the wise silence. Plato called soul the good and the beautiful. Aristotle called it being. The Zulu call it moya. Those who follow the religion of Judaism call it Ein Sof, that which is everything and nothing. The ancient Egyptians, the ancestors called it Ba, Ka, and Ankh. We call it soul. We call it soul. I believe that's the place where our answer is, and it's also the place where I like to say poetry comes from. Y'all may remember that magic young lady who transformed the nation, mesmerized us, Amanda Gorman. The last paragraph of her poem she read at that great day, she says, there's a place where this poem dwells. It is here. It is now. In the yellow song of dawn's bell, where we write an American lyric. I offer this is what's happening, XK, as I consider you and all the other folks too. This is a new lyric that we are just beginning to tell. End of quote. And I say, that's that beloved community. That's what that is, where we do not think alike. I don't want to be Mike. I ain't gonna never be Mike. And guess what? That's okay. And Mike, you got to find that out. Yes. Oh, let's have a little fun now. I have a couple of slides to talk about where I live. Sarah, 2 slides which speak to this moment, I believe, in terms of both realities out there in the world and this society where we find. One is called Rainbows. This is where I live. That's Sedona, Arizona. That's a real photo that my beloved took. Ain't that sweet? I like to breathe on that nature. And this is also where I live. Can you see my young man there standing in Walmart? BIPOC woman taking a look at his grocery, making sure the bill is right. But you see what he has on his side? That gun in the holster in Walmart, ready to shoot and draw if necessary. In all legal spiegel. Okay, thank you. I just find that parallel. That's where we are. That sweetheart Mother Teresa, she said, she says, why don't we have peace, y'all? I offer what she says. If we have no peace, it is because we have forgotten. Remember I told you about the ancient way? We have forgotten that we belong to each other. We forgot that. Sisi ni sawa, as they would say in Swahili. Sisi ni sawa. We are the same. Sisi ni sawa. Hey, we're the same. And Maggie, and we're different. So anti-Cartesian mind. Things are always like that. You can never get a handle, and it's okay. So how did we get here? I'm going to take 10 minutes. Oh, we're good. I'm still a little bit. So how did we get here? I offer Eddie Glaude, Professor Eddie Glaude talked about it a little earlier. But it's just a word, but it is so much more than a word. It puts it into perspective. This I offer is how we got here. Can you play that Traces of the Trade video for us? And that'll take us on out. for our first break here.
Katrina Brown is with us. She documented her roots in the film Traces of the Trade, a story from the deep north.
One day, my grandmother traced back. I was in seminary when I got a booklet in the mail that she wrote for all her grandchildren. She shared our family history, all the happy days. She also explained that the first DeWolf, Mark Anthony, came to Bristol as a sailor in 1744. And then she wrote, I haven't stomach enough to describe the ensuing slave trade. What hit me hard was the realization that I already knew this. Knew, but somehow buried it along the way. What no one in my family realized was that the DeWolfs were the largest slave trading family in U.S. history. They brought over 10,000 Africans to the Americas in chains. 500,000 of their descendants could be alive today.
A clip from Traces of the Trade, a story from the deep north, narrated, produced, and directed by Katrina Brown. After the film aired on PBS's POV in 2008, she went on to found the Tracing Center on Histories and Legacies of Slavery to inspire dialogue and active response to this history and its many legacies. Katrina Brown now joins us from and still with us, MIT professor Craig Stephen Walder, author of the new book, Ebony and Ivy, Race, Slavery, and the Troubled History of America's Universities. Katrina, take us from there. You discover, though you say you knew, some kind of primal secret, what your family, how significant the DeWolfs were in slave trading.
It's in our family case, it's a bit of a stand-in for the region as a whole because I heard things as a child, but I didn't allow them to sink in because it's so, it's basically cognitive dissonance, I would say, for white Northerners to think that we have any relationship to slavery because we're so much, I think, all of us raised and educated in our schools to believe the South were the bad guys and the North were the Northerners were the heroes. So it was hard to comprehend and shocking to discover as I dug more into it. And because of this larger untold story of the role of the North, I decided to produce a documentary. And what we did was basically I invited relatives to join me on a journey to retrace the triangle trade of our ancestors. And 9 brave cousins came with me, and we went to Rhode Island and then Ghana and Cuba, where the DeWolfs owned plantations in that pattern that Professor Wilder was talking about of even after slavery was abolished in the North, even after the slave trade itself was abolished in the North, folks like the DeWolfs continued to be invested in slavery through actual plantations in the Caribbean, in their case Cuba, as well as through that carrying trade of provisioning the islands and the American South.
I want to go to another clip of Traces of the Trade. You and your relatives, as you said, go to Ghana. You've just visited the dark, dank rooms where Africans were kept until they were sold and loaded onto ships. This is your relative, Tom DeWolf, describing his reaction.
The thing that I guess strikes me more than anything right now is that we've talked when we were in Bristol and we were in Providence and we're listening to historians and scholars, and we've heard people talk about, you've got to place it in the context of the times, and this is the way things were done, and this is how, life was. And I sit in that dungeon and I say, it was an evil thing, and they knew it was an evil thing, and they did it anyway. And I couldn't have said that before tonight.
Let's go to another clip from Traces of the Trade. When you and your relatives visit Bristol, Rhode Island, where the DeWolf family lived and operated their slave trade. In this scene, you're visiting with local historians.
The more historians we talked to, the more sobering it got.
The slave trade, you got to remember, is not just a few people taking a boat and sending it out. Everyone in town lived off slavery. the boat makers, the iron workers who make the shackles, the coopers who made the barrels to hold the rum, the distillers who took the molasses and sugar and made it into rum. So literally the whole town was dependent on the slave trade.
All of the North was involved. All these cities and towns along the coast, Salem, Boston, Providence, New London, New Haven, New York, and the rural areas around them, either traded slaves or manufactured goods or raised farm products for the slave trade.
That was historian Joanne Pope Mellish in a clip from Traces of the Trade. Katrina Brown, some members of your family went on this journey with you. You were also shunned by others. Where has this taken you? I mean, this is not, as you point out, just any family involved with slavery, although that's unbelievable to say in itself. It's your family is the largest slave trading family in the United States, and it's in the North.
Yeah, so it, wouldn't shock you or listeners to hear that there was obviously a great deal of anxiety and discomfort and nervousness about the idea of publicizing our family history, and I think one of the things I've come to appreciate is the depth of the emotions that get in the way for white Americans more broadly, not just our family. We're an extreme case, but I think it's a sort of an example of a larger pattern, which is that defensiveness, fear, guilt, shame, those emotions get in our way, both from really confronting the history and coming to appreciate the vast extent of sort of the tentacles of the institution of slavery and how fundamental it was to the birth and success of our nation, and to paving the way for the waves of immigrants that came subsequently. So, discomfort looking at that history, but then also, obviously, discomfort around grappling with the implications for today and really coming to grips with that. And I hear so many Black Americans say, we're not trying to guilt trip you. Quit taking it so personally. We just want you white folks to show up for the work together with us of repairing those harms that, continue to plague this country. So I've noticed how I've gone from extreme kind of knee-jerk guilt reaction upon learning this about my family and my region to a more grounded and I would say mature and calmer ability to take stock of the inheritance that I think, we're an extreme case again, but it's it provides a view into what I think all white Americans need to look at in terms of those legacies of white privilege and whatnot.
And Katrina, what is your family's, the DeWolf family's relation to Brown? Of course, your last name is Brown, but Brown University, of course, they're based in Rhode Island. I know one of the DeWolfs wrote the alma mater of Brown.
So I'm Brown with an E, so it is a different Brown, but yeah, James DeWolf, who was one of the more prominent slave traders in the DeWolf family, apprenticed with John Brown, who was a slave trader, and they both ended up in Congress and worked together to help preserve the slave trade, to help protect the Rhode Island slave trade, and all kind of in cahoots even with President Thomas Jefferson around some of that. It's a longer story, but in any case, the economy of Rhode Island was steeped in the slave trade. It usually shocks people to hear that Rhode Island was the leading slave trading state in the country, not South Carolina or Virginia. And that leads to the founding of the university and some of the early funds for Brown University.
Yeah, breathe and take that in. I know for me, when I first saw that a little while years ago, I never forgot that information about the North. And I want to thank Katrina Brown out loud and on purpose for the work she's doing and has done. So as we take our break, I offer you to sit with what you saw for the hour and get you something to eat and relax and all that. So what did your folks say about race? And I offer, or any other, the gender piece, all of that's there, But today I'm going to focus on that one because I believe that's where we are now as we sit in our time of turmoil and the insurrection and all that we see with voting rights and all of that. I stand with Professor Eddie Glaude. We may call it economic, but down at the bottom of it, we still have that race piece going on.
I want to say that in the Commission on Institutional Change, the report has a section, and I've already preached about this last year, but they have a section about a church in Massachusetts that has a history of Africans working on the church staff or enslaved people working on the church staff. Can't remember which congregation that is right now. We also had one of our very renowned UU ministers, David Petit, who died last year. He was the lead minister on our credentialing team at the UUA, who wrote in the UU World about several years ago about his family history of owning Africans, enslaved people. And it caused quite a, I won't say uproar, but he was stunned to discover that his family had owned enslaved people, and so much so that he wrote about it and they published it.
If I may add, I had the pleasure and honor of spending quite a bit of time with David Petit. Not only did he write about it, this man with the gun, he and his wife had traveled back. What he'd found was not only was his family, they're 8th generation Unitarian Universalists out of New England. They are the epitome of the good guys. There's no way his folks were involved in slavery or benefited or inherited any of that wealth at all. And then he discovered, oh my God, not only were we involved, but I got people who were captains of the ship. And he traced the ships and the voyages. And then, bless his soul, he had the audacity for him and his wife to go back to the specific villages in Ghana themselves and see and sit with those people face to face. And not only that, he had the audacity to find the descendants of some of the slaves that his ancestors owned and where they're living today. And he went and visited those people today. No, they didn't shoot him, or the story, I can't get it. It's a big part of another workshop I do. I can't believe, XK, you said that. But I have a whole story about him. He went to Chicago where these people live. They wouldn't talk to him on the phone. Finally, grandma said, come on, boy. He went there, opened up the door. He showed them his papers. They still hugging. It was such a wonderful reception. But speaking of reception, I promise to try to stay pretty much on time. So what did your ma and pa say about race when you were coming up? What did they say about race when you were coming up? And anything else that's my question for you. And any other reflections you have upon the film we've just saw. So have a great break, great lunch, and we'll see you back here at 1 o'clock. Good Lord willing, and creek don't rise. See you then.
We shall be known by the company we keep, by the ones who circle around to tend these fires. We shall be known by the ones who sow and reap the seeds of change alive from deep within the earth. It is time now. It is time now that we thrive. It is time we lead ourselves into the well. It is time now, and what a time to be alive. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. We shall be known by the company we keep, by the ones who circle round to tend these fires. We shall be known by the ones who sow and reap the seeds of change alive from deep within the earth. It is time now. It is time now that we thrive. It is time we lead ourselves into the well. It is time now, and what a time to be alive. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. We shall be known by the company we keep, by the ones who circle around to tend these fires. We shall be known by the ones who sow and reap the seeds of change alive from deep within the earth. It is time now. It is time now that we thrive. It is time we lead ourselves into the well. It is time now, and what a time to be alive. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. Yay.
Pew, 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 pew. Yay. It is time now that we lead ourselves back into the well. Greetings and blessings, everybody. Welcome back. So how was your break? It was all right? Great, great, great. So before we begin, who did I ask about that Blumenbach last time?
Carol Winkler.
Carol Winkler. What you got, Carol? Who was Johann Friedrich Blumenbach?
Well, I think he was probably one of my ancestors because I'm German too.
Wie geht's, mein Schatz?
And I agreed with his philosophy that characteristics are designed by geography, where people live, what they eat, and what the weather and air they're exposed to determines how they look. I kind of skimmed a long biography.
Did you see what he made up in 1779? Anybody? Okay, well, Mr. Blumenbach's claim to fame is that he made up the concept of the 5 races of people.
Yeah, I remember that.
that
No.
continue to dominate our mind, our education, and our history to this day. In 1779, that concept of Caucasian, Negroid, Mongolian, I don't have them in front of, he made it up. So I say that's somebody everybody should, we know about him, even if we do not know about him.
I think the important piece about that is that he created a hierarchy too. And he said that the Caucasian was the most intelligent and supreme of all the others.
Yes.
And that came from the Caucasus, the word Caucasus, from the Caucasus Mountains in Europe. So Europe, I think that's what they are. Or Africa.
Yeah.
Europe.
It's Europe. For sure. And that continues to dominate our thinking to this day. Rodney, greetings and blessings.
And to you,
There
sir.
was somewhere in the room. Yay, man, good to see you. I had a question
Good to
for you.
see
There
you.
was at some point in the road, you had something to share with us, maybe a little later, or is that still something we're going to do?
The envisioning portion that I asked about?
Yes, I don't recall what it was. I'm
Oh.
just checking in. I had a note to ask you about that.
Oh, yeah. No, it was just a question that I had when we were talking about this workshop. And, the question for me is, how do we envision beloved community in our local context of a twice colonized New Mexico?
Okay, well, let's hold that to a little bit later.
Yes.
Okay, we're going to go into breakout rooms now where you folks get a chance to share with one another.
Reverend, you're muted.
Oh, hi, I'm back. I was going to say I did my commercial in our group and I share with everyone that I hope you experienced what I call the power of story, the power of everyone's story. And my offering to our group, which I'll offer to this entire group, is you can be in congregation with someone for 8 years or 10 years and never know, as I learned from John, that it was a black man who picked him up from the basketball game when he got that big old knot on his head. Or how close to the railroad track Virginia lived, and what did that mean, right? And what it's like for Tamara to come and to be held in that strong black community and going off to Prairie View A&M. So my offering is that you get to know these things. You get to know this about the person. That's just not, the person I see on Sunday. Oh yeah, I know him. He's that tall one, or he's that old one, or he's that fill in the blank one. Everyone has a story, and there's so much power in each other's stories, getting to know folks and the stories. So that's my commercial about that. So each of the groups, did y'all have somebody who said they might be able to share highlights or other jewels of wisdom or comments from your group? Yes? So I'd like one of those people to chime in now and tell us what group you were in, who was in your group, and stuff you can share that, that you're able to share. Keep them, secret, but who would like to go first?
I can speak for the group I was in, I think. You guys correct me if I'm wrong, but
And
most
Sally
of,
is so right. You're welcome to chime in, y'all, at any time. Please, Sally.
okay, but I think most of our conversation was about the subtle biases we absorbed more than the overt because of where we grew up and what our parents said out loud as opposed to what they did. And so that's about what we talked about. Is there anything else, folks? Of course, Joel.
I think everybody in our group said it's complicated.
Your group is very, very plugged into our reality. That's one word I would underline. Complicated. No doubt about it. And I heard you use the word subtle, Sally, to describe the experience that some folks had. Yeah. Anybody else from that group want to chime in? Dick, do I see you're highlighted, but I don't hear nothing? Or did I?
Okay, sure. Well, everybody had somewhat different takes on things. I think I was the only one who mentioned that I had a parent who displayed some racist attitudes. She didn't really teach me, my mother didn't really teach me racism, but she did let me know on many occasions that she was uncomfortable sharing physical space with Black men. Never really said anything about race relations, and she was from a fairly white background, grew up in a church that was somewhat related to the Amish, with very strong religious and very white membership. My dad had a very different take on things. He had grown up with a father who had a business, a fairly successful business, and he employed many Black people in his business. And he had taught my dad that it was important to treat people with respect. One time my dad was with his father on the streets in the town where they lived, and they ran into one of my dad's employees, a Black man, and my dad immediately greeted him enthusiastically by his nickname. That was how he knew them at work. And his father chewed him out about that, said that he deserves to be treated with respect. You know, when you see him at work, it's okay to call him, treat him as a friend or whatever, or talk to him like you always do. But when you see him on the street, treat him with call him by his name with a Mr. and treat him with the respect he deserves.
Great. The power of story. You still remember those stories, don't you?
Yes, you do.
Don't we all? We all have our stories. I remember the stories my dad told me, some of the stories, what it was like to grow up in Hattiesburg, Mississippi. And every time a white person came down, walking down the sidewalk, you had to get off the sidewalk.
Mm-hmm.
You're not allowed to be on the sidewalk with a person of that race. These stories resonate with me. They resonate with all of us. Whatever your story is or was, doing my commercial again about the power of stories, and that stories can keep us stuck, or stories can unstick us. And it's time to perhaps write a new story. Okay. How about a spokesperson for, how many groups did we have? So how many groups did we have? 4, 3 or 4?
4, I think.
Yeah. Okay, anybody else from the other group want to share, or a spokesperson to sum it up, then we'll open it up.
I'll talk. In our group, I'll say that one thing we shared was that we all had stories of being naive to race or racial situations, you know. And that we had a little bit of a talk on the idea or the understanding of the advantage or the privilege, you know, of not being a darker race and what that means. So that was
Can you share some of that? What came up?
You know, what came up was that I believe a lot of the misconception is that the privilege is something tangible, something that you can hold. You know, when reality, it's more of the chance, the opportunity, the non-judgment.
And the lack,
Or just,
the lack of having to worry about things,
yes,
certain things.
you know, the ability to walk out your door without being worried. That's an advantage that a lot of people do not realize they have every day that they walk out of their door. So that was a good conversation.
What I realized through our group, based on me being the only non-white person there, is that in my neighborhood, we didn't have anybody coming to clean our house, or so I was embraced by the total Black experience. Where my other people in my group, they had people that worked for them that was treated with respect, which brings me to realize, or no, I've always known this, that all Black and white experience during difficult times were not all negative, but they were there. So even they didn't hear any negative talk about Black people besides, you know, it was a cautious type of talk. Also, I'm realizing too, it's based on the time, the age that you were born in, which you experienced, or places where you lived, if you got more information about what was happening with Blacks and whites. If you were sheltered, like everybody in my group, then we kind of eased on through it and there was no bumps in the ground. It wasn't for me until I became an adult, after I left I went through a Black experience all the way through college, that I even know anything firsthand about racism. My world was pretty well protected, as it was with my other people in my group. And I think that's about it, guys. Do you think this covers it pretty well?
Well, I was in that group. That's why I was joking with you. I know as a non-participant, and bless their soul, which I didn't tell her not to. She stuck me in the group. So I was so happy I was in there. And my experience, let me just amplify what Tamara said about, and someone else said about it's complicated. It ain't never black and white. And yet it's always black and white, if you will. There are the positive stories. I don't have enough breath. I won't be on earth long enough to clap my hands and call the names of good white folks in this fight.
Yes.
Be clear about that. We know about John Brown and all the rest, James Reeb and all. I won't be alive long enough to give them the glory they deserve. So take that in. And and there are those who, as we heard about in that story from Traces of the Trade, that small clip, which is from a much larger and longer movie documentary that we go through for hours in another workshop, but they talk about James DeWolf, who she spoke of, was the second richest man in the United States at that time, based entirely upon slavery. And I hope you got that piece about Rhode Island being the most complicit state in that institution, that peculiar institution of ours, American slavery. Everyone in the town benefited. I think he named the boatsmen and the coopers and whoever, all the people that did the whatever, and all over up and down that shore. So both Ann and Reverend XK alluded to David Petit. You have those stories of white folks who recognized the power of their inheritance, what they were gifted and what they have without asking, and who decided to do something about that.
Yeah,
Yes.
just this is Dave. Just one
Yes.
one to mention there that you talk about like Rhode Island, but then as a Midwesterner and unconscious advantages that again, much of that land was, you could argue, expropriated from the indigenous people, and we sort of gloss over that. Slavery was a very important part of the story, but then the other was one of really genocide.
Yes.
That occurred where there isn't a remnant in many cases.
And the only thing I would add would be the word "and," Dave, so there's no but. There was slavery and genocide. And that is in our soil. That is why I began our opening honoring with the soil and the 500 nations of people who lived here.
Yes.
I had the pleasure, I'm gonna tell you more stories, nothing like stories. I spent a year last year in Northern California as the minister for the Humboldt Unitarian Universalist Fellowship in Bayside, California, in the Redwoods. This is so far is 6 hours north of the Bay. It is so far up in Northern California that the native people shared with me they are one of the few who never had to leave their land.
And I say Eureka.
You can say Eureka, then I'll say Arcadia. That's why I know about the Wiyot and the Kuruk and the native people there. I said that, Dave, to honor what you were saying in the following way. A year of being with those folks, and they invited me into some of the native situations and traditions and gathering, and I was able to share with them before I left that, you know, as adamant as I am about the treatment of African Americans in slavery, I said to one man who I got to know very well and who invited me to join the board of True North. This is the leading native group of folks who are fighting the fight in that part of the world. Hey, you know what, Terry? When they start looking at reparations real seriously, which they have finally begun with HR 40, just to study the idea, I said, you know, it's one thing, I was kidnapped. I mean, the big I, not me. And, you know, I grew up in Chicago, but I in the big I, in our tradition and I was kidnapped. And the folks mentioned about the millions or so who never made it. But that notwithstanding, I said, and it brought me to this strange land. But you and you were at the home, you were at the flat, and they kicked your door down at the house. You were sitting there making moxicans and eating corn, doing what you do for thousands of years, and somebody literally kicked your door down. So I vote for you you need it first. I will wait behind you until we clean that up. I'm next, the big I. So thank you for that. Yeah, anybody else? And that was, I don't think I would have said that without that experience, not like life experience. I just throw that in there too, you know? Yeah, yeah. Do we have another spokesperson from another group before we move on?
Not, I want to just hark back to what you said about Amanda Gorman.
Yes.
Because when I listened to her, I think when we all listen to her, we realize, to me, she kind of comes in the tradition of Rosa Parks, in that she kind of shows up on the scene unknown to most of us, as if she just somehow miraculously appeared, the way Rosa Parks miraculously refused to give up her seat on a bus in Montgomery. In reality, they were both highly trained and suited for those particular situations after years of training behind the scenes. Rosa with civil rights, the Freedom Riders, people like King and Andrew Young, and all the civil rights leaders, Huey Long, that were sitting behind the doing the sit-ins, and Amanda Gorman, who was Harvard trained to do poetry and fine arts and literature. So I think this work, to me, is the similar parallel, is that we're training to do that type of social action when the time comes. That sitting in and getting to know each other, understanding each other's experiences, and being taught about the differences of isms and multiculturalism and the use of power situates us when the time comes for us to stand up and be an Amanda Gorman or Rosa Parks or John Lewis taking a beat over the head.
Indeed. And I would offer in our own way every day. Or as I like to say, you can make a difference when you go to Safeway or whatever grocery stores they have down there in New Mexico. So this is my offer. That's my piece. You in every way, in your own way, and we will be known by the company we keep. We will be known by the company we keep, and the company you're keeping, and again, every day. And as Peggy's beloved, I'm guessing, said, it's complicated. So I'm still learning names. It's complicated. I just,
I don't know what
we
that
feel
means,
so
though.
much pressure to say.
What does that mean for them? I don't understand that.
What do you mean? Oh,
what does this complicated mean? What is the word? The phrase is complicated. What's underneath that?
Joe.
Well, go ahead, Tamara.
In terms of our group, everybody told the story that they were told one thing, and then they observed and saw and experienced other things, and that changed constantly by situation. So what they were told and what they experienced was complicated. There was no dominant truth.
Oh, do as I say, not as I do.
Yeah, some of that, and it also occurred to me hearing Dick's story that we all sort of talked about as well. If you knew a person of color, that changed your relationship with them, rather than just someone you saw on television or someone that you didn't know. Okay. So those personal relationships were different from the community relationships.
Well, it brings up, let me do a commercial, I think, to honor where I think XK is coming from, why I say, oh, it's complicated. It is both complicated and pretty damn simple. At the same time, it's back to that both damn thing. What's under the complicated, we don't want to make it complicated, as my folks use it. It ain't Chinese arithmetic. It ain't that kind of complicated. But what's coming up for me is the thing about the complicated for me means this unconscious debris, these messages, the myths, the customs, all of these isms, stand with the race piece for a minute. It happens on 4 levels. It happens on 4 levels, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. What am I talking about? I'm talking about on the institutional level. You have laws. Big one pops up, laws said, Peggy can't vote, Virginia can't vote, Tamara can't vote. I can vote. By law. Black folks couldn't vote by law to 1965. By law, institutional. So we have an institutional level of the isms. We have a cultural level. Those are the myths, the stories you were told, the movies you watched, the Tarzanization of our minds. Want to remind you we were in this boat together. The myths, the customs. Then we get to the interpersonal level. You and me and you, how we treat one another. Somebody just talked about actually getting to know someone. So I'm gonna talk, the one that comes up, how did, oh, I forgot, oh, how did that affect John? John, please chime in. How did it affect John for that man who happened to look like me to pick him up off the basketball court when he got that big knot on his head and carry him home? What did that mean? How did that change it? Did it change his attitude about anything? Or the folks that worked for you, you know, all of the stories I heard in our group, majority folks who live affluent, and they knew Black folks. There was the lady who came and cleaned the house, the one who was there every Thanksgiving and every Christmas, making sure the meals were just so. Flip side of that, she can't be in two places at one time. She was not at home with her family. She was not at home with her family. My mom used to clean white folks' house and do the same thing. Couldn't be that. Remember dropping her off and what that felt like and what that does to a young'un. So that's the interpersonal. And then there's the personal level, which is where I think the work really begins. Inside, with me. What's up with me? How am I feeling about that? What is my personal, what am I going to do about that?
That's right.
How do I see that? So that for me is where the work is. I think it begins like at the end of that 8th principle that we float, that I know y'all working on, that last line, I said, I want to kiss them in the forehead because they speak to it. The institutions is secondary. Not to say it ain't there. But how do I can't think of the exact line now, but it focuses on me. It's coming up in our kick around in a minute. That's where the work, that's what I'm doing my commercial. That's what MultiKulti is about, especially for me in communities of people like y'all who have the audacity to say you're faith people. That you work in the 5th dimension, the transpersonal, even beyond the 4 I mentioned, beyond the law and the customs and the movies I saw and what my mama and daddy told me. I still want to see you as a person because I have a faith-based duty to do so. So I'm going to call you out on it. If it's like that, what is more powerful for you, for me, than that? Or is it just something I purport to do? So when somebody comes up with something like the 8th principle and other congregations I'm working with, not y'all, and all the judgment excuses come up by, well, I don't like that verbiage. Maybe that line ought to be like that, or maybe that, I don't know, that ain't, I don't know how that shit be like. Maybe y'all just say, no.
All right, preach.
Well, I guess it comes out
me around in the middle.
It comes out every now and then. Hey, I'm saying an offering because I try my best to do no have-tos, no shouldas. My offering is for all my white allies. There's one word that I offer. It's paramount. Listen. Listen. Just listen. And this is revolutionary for folks who have constantly and by law given the right to always be speaking and always be right and always have the power. Notwithstanding, I hear you, your dad came over with 6 cents in his pocket and he ended up opening that shop and he kicked ass and he made stuff for the family. I'm down with that. I ain't taking nothing away from that. Bless his soul. But Miss Katrina Brown, if you heard her in that clip from Traces, she talked about what that was like and that who paved the way for the immigrants. The way was already paved. Ellis Island was already built. Who built it? Same people who built the White House. Same people who built the White House. Paved the road for the immigrants. They ain't taking nothing away from immigrants. Italians and Irish and all the great folks who came through later and worked their butts off and earned hey, it's all good. But we want to hear the whole story. The whole story. And sometimes, I'm gonna steal your word. Peggy, what is your husband's name?
Joel.
Joel. Thank you, Joel. I got a block on that name. I got you now. And taking nothing away from Joel, the stuff's complicated. That's all. But we don't want to get let us not get bogged down in it. It's complicated, but it ain't Chinese arithmetic. And here's the other thing. We don't have to figure it out. This is nothing for you to figure out. This is not a mathematical problem. It's a heart challenge. Can't be figured out. Got to be lived out. How you living? How you showing up? How you treating folk? And are you listening? Are you listening? Then damn, she might know what she's talking about. I'm going to flip it to where I say where my white man lives. My white man lives in the area of gender, and where I'm trying to expand my understanding of gender, the gender expansion. I never know what it's like to be a woman, so I'm going to shut up and I'm going to listen. I don't know what that's about. I ain't got no womb. I ain't gave birth to no babies. I ain't seen, I don't know about that, except from the point of the observer. So when they talk about what that's like and the negative side of that, the challenge of that, I owe it to myself. I'm choosing at this point in my young development to shut up and listen and be attentive, because I want to learn and I want to grow. So that's my offer. And we all got it. So this, we're all in that same boat thing. I say it's like the Titanic, man. These icebergs everywhere. Now, some of us are up on the top of the boat, like I always get his name mixed up because I call him DiCaprio or Brad Pitt. I can't tell them apart. But he's up top there and his hair is blowing in the wind and shit. He's one with the wind and he's up top. Same boat, but down there in the furnace room. I'm down there in the furnace room shoveling my ass off, keeping that boat going. But make no doubt about it, same boat. Now the words of Nelson Mandela come up. This, if I ever, as a Black man who is arguably concerned and angry and full of love and dying to see this happen, this is what makes me get up in the morning. So y'all stuck with one of them kind of guys. It's like they just say, hey, I'll tell you what we're gonna do. We're gonna take this Black dude. We're gonna bring, all his folks gonna be from Mississippi. We're gonna send him to the south side of Chicago, the most segregated city in the United States. And he's gonna grow up in what they call one of them tough neighborhoods, yeah. And he's gonna grow up to go to the army, and he's gonna be like XK, gonna be a military man. He's gonna meet all kind of people, he's gonna learn stuff. He's gonna realize a lot of shit he learned was full of shit. People are people, and what's up with that story I've been told. So now I gotta preach it everywhere I go. All that stuff is true, and at the end of the day, I cut you, you bleed. It don't mean nothing. Race don't mean, and I can't say it because I'm sort of in church, but it don't mean S-H-I, you know what.
I think there is something to be. Can I say this?
And it means a lot. And I'll shut up after that. It don't mean nothing, and it mean a lot. Go ahead.
But I think there's something to be learned, or I'm not sure what the exact word you use in terms of the takeaway, the action from this training. But I think there is something to be gained or can be gained that can help us move forward, which is how do you have difficult conversations about equity, diversity, and multiculturalism and inclusion with people who have different perspectives in the congregation itself.
Yes, and that I saved for the
And
end
how do
of my
you help
presentation.
also along those lines, how do you help people who observe bad behavior or microaggressions or just behavior that is born out of not knowing, to speak up and say something in real time about what they see and observe?
And
in order to get through the conflict avoidance, how do you want to not avoid? You don't want to avoid it. You want to be able to jump in there in the right way and to deal with it.
And as usual, you're a step ahead of me in my presentation. I saved that for the end. And I called on the only man who I've ever heard speak. And he caused me to jump out of my seat and run to the stage. I'll never forget it. He said what he said. I jumped out of my seat and I ran to the stage I was going to be the first person to meet that man. And that is, what can we do about that? And looking at my clock, that's on. I'm going to save that for a little bit, and don't let me get away without it. Of course, you can't. But I wanted to mention that boat thing about what Mr. Mandela said about that, who, as I say, reminds me of the ultimate, not 30, not 30 minutes or 30 days or 3 weeks or, folks beating him up and no. Try 3 decades of the most ridiculous oppression you can imagine, being imprisoned in the prison that Mr. Mandela was in. Had all the right to be angry, if you will, and display all kind of anger and judgment. But what he said was, I knew, as well as I knew anything, I knew as well as I knew anything, that the oppressor must be liberated just as surely as the oppressed. That's what I believe too. That's why I'm here in your face. That's why we do the workshop. Because believe it or not, my friends who are not BIPOC, you've been sold a bill of goods too. The oppressor must be liberated just as surely as the oppressed. So now I'm going to respond to Reverend XK. So, Sarah, you there?
I'm here.
Okay. Pull up that Brian Stevenson response to XK. I'm offering this as a response, and I'll come back to the other things. Remember, you got to hold me, because I said the juice is what's important, not what I'm going to say, but what comes up. He brought up a good point. So here's a shot at it.
Sounds good.
Here we go.
I want to affirm how you don't have to be embarrassed to say, I'm trying to change the world. I think we can change the world. And I have a simple little prescription. I think there are 4 things that we're going to have to think about. We're going to have to commit. We're poor and suffering and marginalized. We think we can change the world by staying just on Harvard's campus, by staying in places of power and privilege, staying just in our elected offices. If we care about injustice, if we care about inequality, if we care about poverty, if we care about disability, if we care about addiction and dependency, we're going to have to get close enough to those who are poor and excluded and neglected, addicted and dependent, to understand the nature of that problem. Second thing we're going to have to do is we're going to have to change these narratives. We have mass incarceration in America because we declared a misguided war on drugs. We said that people who are drug addicted and drug dependent are criminals. For alcoholism, we said that's a disease. And if you know somebody who's an alcoholic and you see them going to a bar, you don't think, oh, we better call the police. We have a different framework. But for addiction and dependency, we said those are criminals, and we've locked up hundreds of thousands of people. Now, I think that narrative has to change because I think what allowed us, what made us comfortable with those policy choices is what I call the politics of fear and anger. And I'm here to tell you that if we allow ourselves to be governed by fear and anger, we're going to tolerate things we're not supposed to tolerate. That's how you get comfortable with inequality. That's how you get comfortable with injustice. That's how you get comfortable abusing people in ways that are clearly indecent and wrong. You do it because you've been given a narrative of fear and anger that makes you think that that's justifiable. The third thing we're going to have to do is we're going to have to stay hopeful. You have to protect your hope quotient, your hope dynamic. Because sometimes being in spaces like this can rattle you. The faculty are brilliant, but they're trying to complicate the world for you. And sometimes when the world starts to get complicated, you lose hope that you can do the things you thought you could do. You begin to actually no longer believe that that world-changing thing you were hoping to achieve, you can achieve. And so while you are dealing with the complexity of the world, you're going to have to affirmatively work on protecting your hope. Your hope is vital to your capacity to change the world. I actually believe that hopelessness is the enemy of justice. Injustice prevails where hopelessness persists. And the fourth and final thing we're going to have to do, and this is a hard one, we're going to have to do things that are uncomfortable and inconvenient. Because we do not change the world by only doing the things that are comfortable and convenient. And I hate that. Because we're humans, and humans are biologically and psychologically programmed to do what's comfortable. We like comfort. And that means that we're going to have to make a choice to do uncomfortable things, to change things. I tried to research my way out of this, I did. As a faithful alum of this university, I looked and did some research, and I tried to find an example where justice prevailed, where equality triumphed, and nobody had to do anything uncomfortable or inconvenient. Can't find any examples of that. I've learned really simple things doing my work. I believe that each of us is more than the worst thing we've ever done. I believe that for every human being. I think if someone tells a lie, they're not just a liar. I think even if you kill someone, you're not just a killer. And justice requires that we know the other things we are before we judge you.
So I have a breakdown of the 4 things he said, XK, I think, which applies to us and to apply. The first one, which is to me, spoken right to us in our UU congregations, is when I go there as a minister and they ask the question, where are all the BIPOC people at? Where are the Black people at? Where are the young people at? Why don't they come to our place? Wrong question. Why don't you go to their place? What's up with you? My Harvard-trained brother, Brian Stevenson, first thing is we must get proximate. If you want to change, if you want to be a part of, how about go be a part of? Get out of that institution. Get out of that sanctuary. Better way to say it. Take that sanctuary with you. Because we take that sanctuary with you. Number one, now this is only if you want to change. Let me back up for those who don't want to do nothing. I ain't mad at you either. You sit there, eat your crumpets, tea, chill out, talk trash. It's all good. Write a check. It's good. It's good. You got to have all kind of folks. But if you want to change, if you have that caring gene, if there's something in your heart that says, I want to do something. XK talking about, I got a little Rosa Parks in me. I got little Amanda Gorman running around inside of my head and heart. And you want to do, and I dare say, most of y'all do. I ain't never met you. But my belief is you would not be on this Saturday afternoon spending 2-3 hours with some bald head dude talking about what we talking about if you didn't care. So I'm just going to go on record. I ain't saying that we got no answers. So consider these 4 things. Number 1, get proximate to the situation, whatever the situation you want to change is. So the congregation that I think I'm not going to be working with, as a minister type, I can't say it out loud because it ain't official, but that's the first question they want to know. Hey, Rev, when you go? So when I have the meeting and I say, hey, y'all, here's the thing. We got to go down there, wherever there is. Whoever you want to think ought to be coming to get this message, which I think they should be getting, and that's personal, because it worked for me. I never heard of you, boo-boo, or none of that. But when I heard the message, it resonated someplace. So we must get proximate if we want to change. And Mr. Stevens just say, not just change your sanctuary. He put out there what Rumi put out there. Rumi said, think crazy. Think of a crazy large project like Noah. Think crazy. Act like Noah. But get proximate, y'all. Get proximate to whatever it is you want to have an effect upon. The effect is directly proportional to my relationship with that, literally in a physical, literal sense. The many times that I have shared that with folks and the stories that come back is when you go and you see. I remember one now where a white guy went to say, I always wanted to go and to the other side where the black folks lived on the other side of the railroad tracks in my town, and I never did. And I went because I was scared. I'll cut to the quick. And man, I met some people and I learned how to dance. They didn't beat me up or anything. In fact, I learned how to dance. True story. So I offer that whatever it is you want to change, you might be surprised what it's like when you get proximate. And I love his choice of, because he is Harvard trained, bless his soul. Number 1, get proximate. Number 2, change the narrative. And for me, I use the word story because it's all about your story. Change the narrative. What's your story? And where does fear and hope fit into your story? What were you told about whatever it is you want to change? Change the narrative from one of fear and anger. How do we do that? Well, how did you get the one you got? How did we get the one we got? Well, somebody told it to me. I watched a lot of movies. I grew up where I grew up, and at some point I said, enough already. I can read. Well, I'll tell you all the true story. Daggone. I was 27 years old when I became an American. Now, I knew I was born in Mississippi. I knew I was raised on the south side of Chicago. I knew I lived in Illinois. But in my head and in my heart, I was an African, because Malcolm X said in the narrative that if a kitten is born in an oven, that don't make it a biscuit. If a kitten is
Remember that.
born in an oven, that don't make it a biscuit. So I was an African born in America, and my socialization and my reality, it made sense. I'm not an American. I'm not Leave It to Beaver. I don't get treated like these people. I get chased by the police. I get this, I get that. I ain't no American. So I was 27 when I finally got the memo. Oh, yes, you are.
Did you become an American?
American.
No,
Ain't no
American.
A, just American. American. Y'all catch my drift.
George W. says it American.
Yes.
The Texans. Well, we Texans.
That's
say
right.
it,
You're American. That's right. American.
What changed?
What changed? Hey, I looked around at my pregnant wife, and I'll just and I joined the military. An old man at 27. I was an old man at 27 fighting the fight on the streets. I ain't gonna go work for no white folks. They crazy as hell. They don't like me. They ain't never like me. So I'm wondering, so I got hit in the head by a 2x4, wherever it comes. And like I said, it was just like, I changed my narrative. I said, oh yes, I am. And they called me old man too, because I was 27, man. And XK, you appreciate that. So I had to kick butt. #1 in PT with my 27-year-old old butt, because I couldn't, how you calling me old? But anyway, story for another day. So that's how it came about for me. And I said that to say, that's when I got to know white folks. That's where I was going with that. I got proximate. I didn't know this guy then, and none of that, but that's what I did. I joined the society. Be clear, there are millions of folk like me. You see me walking down the street, but I want to say I was where I was. I wasn't on Mars no, I was right there in it, but I wasn't in it.
Wasn't the other dimension from Brian Stevenson on changing the narrative you give to others? For example, a drug addiction story is one narrative is these people are criminals. The alternative narrative, these people are people who are sick in some way and merit treatment.
And I would say that narrative, yes, absolutely, Dave. And this is a narrative that is sold. We all know that distinction he pointed out. It's institutional. It's by law.
Yes, yeah.
So it's no idea of mine, even though I may have an idea. Institutionally, you can go to the bar and I see you and boy, man, I tied one on it. Or even if I'm an alcoholic, I go to AA. They got rooms for me and stuff. And everybody, absolutely, it's the narrative on the back to those levels of the ism, interpersonal level, the personal level. And once he said that, I dare say he changed you on an interpersonal level as he changed me.
I wonder if there's a narrative that we have in our church that needs to be changed with regard to multiculturalism.
Say more.
I'm sorry. That we as a people, we as a people, which means that I feel that I am a member of the family. The family means the church family. So you have a sister, a Black sister that's in my family that goes to this church. But we need to know that we all are racist. We all have work to do. We as receiver of the racism, we feel it physically. You as the giver, you don't feel anything because you're giving it. But we as down through the years from the beginning of time on both sides have been impacted by so much negativism. Peggy hasn't done anything to me. Peggy's my friend. Peggy would be one of the ones that if I was running down the street trying to get away, she would call me in. I have no doubt about that. But there's something in Peggy somewhere.
Tamara, let me do my thing. And say the same thing. Put that word "and" in there instead of "but," please. You running down the street. Hey, thank you.
And Peggy lets me in.
Yes.
I have something I have to work at. I cannot not be racist. I cannot not be racist. Even though I grew up, as I was telling y'all, in a total Black environment all the way through college, protected and loved by my people. It's still in me from way back when. It comes down, it's still in me, even though I did not do or no one's done anything to me up to that point. I still have something deep down in me that needs to be worked on. So anybody in this church or anywhere in this world, you cannot say that you're not racist, ever. It's just not possible. That's just my belief.
Right. And
That's
I would
all I
throw
have to say.
another
I just
word
have to
as a
say
practice. Thank you for sharing. And as a practitioner and a needler, I hear you. So I would offer the word racialized, because yes, I get it. You cannot be biased or prejudiced. It's just, we talked about that earlier, but that's kind of in the deal, especially, again, we grow up with laws and institutions and customs and friends. That's why I offer to my non-BIPOC folks, in that sense, to cut yourself some slack. You've been fed a bunch of crap.
Yes.
And own
We
it.
all.
We all, that's right. But there's
We
a
all.
difference between chitlins and filet mignon. We can draw that difference. Chitlins is one thing, filet mignon is another. And I'm just speaking as
I'm not trying to take away from the struggle. I'm not. But I don't want to be I don't want to beat down the world for the sins of Satan. Forgive me for my Christian side coming up. I don't want to beat down the world for that, but I do want us all to be aware that there is work that needs to be done. And if it's anywhere it should start at our church.
Yes.
That's what we're here for.
And I think
So if we don't want to do it, go ahead, Maggie.
No, I just wanted to, one of the dilemmas, and I don't know if I can articulate this well, but I think, when I hear about getting proximate and changing the narrative, unfortunately, I think of missionaries. And they got proximate and they were hopeful and they changed people's narrative. And I think one of the dilemmas is when we're doing this work, how do we get proximate without having the motivation? I totally get that I need to listen to people of color, but how do we get proximate and how do I listen when it's my agenda that it feels like it's my agenda. And I don't think it should be my agenda. And so that's a dilemma for me when there aren't very many people of color in the congregation. I know I can go to people in the congregation, but that's a struggle to me. It's like, how do we do that without it feeling like proselytizing or being a missionary, which is the least thing I don't think anybody wants to do, but it still feels like there's an agenda. One of the things I thought at the very beginning was, first you have to know, you have to be really clear, what is your agenda? Are we going out to learn from people so that they become UUs? I don't think that's a good agenda myself. I feel like we've got to go and be working on ourselves, and if we need to go out of the church and help other people or be with them in some way of them letting us know what they need from us, but not with a secret agenda of, and I hope you come to my church. I don't know if anybody can relate to this.
No, let me offer you this, and this is revolutionary. No agenda. No agenda. And that's going to be a stretch for you, as it is for all of us. You don't have an agenda. Maggie, you like fire. You can show up down there and burn the place down, or you can show up and be there to cook some food. You see, What does no agenda feel like? That would be, I'm offering and guessing, a new place for you. You're right. The missionaries had something to sell. That doesn't take away from the reality of being proximate. Can I be proximate? And I'm not selling anything. As a matter of fact, boy, I'm not doing anything. This is revolutionary for you use especially with our good rational doing, and thank God we've done what we've done over the years, best of my knowledge. And if we show up being, not doing. I'm listening. I don't know what they're going to do. If I show up with no agenda, they are in charge. Here's the big one, Maggie. You're not in charge. You don't have anything to do.
I appreciate that.
Yes, ma'am. How about that with you? I know you do. I feel you. It's golden. I got to chill on my thing from what I'm all the way through Zoom, the depth and warmth of your commitment. What I'm offering is another way of being, which is contradictory to how you were brought up in society. And here's the deal. You're going to be powerful and with an agenda from my point of view as the observer, like what the hell does she want? You know, I always say to my non-BIPOC friends, you know, you're pretty exotic because we only apply exotic to the other. You know, but they're so exotic. No, you're exotic as exotic in that sense. So my offering is, boy, it's just like what it takes to be a part of the multiculti thing and do the workshop. What you got to do? What I got to read? No, you ain't got to do one thing. Just show up. Just show up. Tamara, I see your hand.
I just wanted to say, I think the key is to remember number one, love is the doctrine of our church. And that's what we have to pay attention to. You don't have to go past step number one. Love is a doctrine for our church. And that means that we have to love each other from within, and then it will spill out into the community. When somebody sees Maggie, you don't have to talk. It'll just show up. And then, because we do all the work of love anyway, we're helping everybody. We're trying to do everything we possibly can do. So our works will be what would catch on fire, because it's done out of love. I'm done. I'm finna go.
I personally want you to show up and say, I'm you. That's what I want you to do.
Yeah, you do have to say,
I don't know how else we can be identified as such unless people can say that. Along with what else they need to say. Let me give you an example. We were in Texas 2 weeks ago, and I was out doing my normal fishing thing, and this other guy was fishing next to me. And I think when you're fishing, you're real proximate with people. They're just very down to earth with you. So the guy was talking about some Asian Americans who were crabbing at the jetties in Padre Island. Except he didn't say they were Asian Americans. He said they were Chinese. And then he said they were Chinks. So I can't stand by and just say, that's okay.
No.
Or when I was in northern New Mexico last month, on my way to Santa Fe, when the guy was fishing with us and he was talking about the virus and how hospitals were writing down, they kept classifying illnesses as coronavirus, even though they weren't coronavirus, in order to get government funds. So I think for me, I'm proximate and I can speak up, but also have to speak up and say I'm a Unitarian Universalist, because to me that conveys a different type of message than just I'm just showing up to be. And speaking to me is a part of being and doing. Does it make sense to you? So I want people to be able to say that they're you.
What I hear you saying, what I hear you saying is exactly what I'm saying. You are saying that this faith is such in your fiber. So I'm saying when you show up, there it is. I was just asked this week in Mississippi when a young man pulled up the driveway and said, how you doing? I said, hi. And he said, oh, how did he get to it? Oh, because I am in a Muslim community and my family is Muslim. And he asked me if I was a Muslim. And I said, I am not. Then you know what his next question was? Are you a Christian? And I said, no, I'm not. And then he said, well, what the heck are you then? And I said, I'm a Unitarian Universalist. And he said that they always, what's that? And I proceed to give him the elevator speech. And I say, man, I'm a Christian with a comma, Muslim with a comma. I got some agnostic and some atheists. I got some Hindus over. Look, there's my Buddhist brother and sister in the background. And blah, blah. I don't care what you, oh man, his eyes got so big. So yeah, it's just in me. Is what I hear you saying, you know. And so that's back to my old piece about, hell, I can change somebody at Safeway. Quickly, before I forget about the proximate thing.
Can I say, can I call on somebody else? I have in my screen, Jan. I like to hear from Jan because she's a person that's really proximate around justice and multiculturalism. And she's a exemplary person in this work. About being
why, thank you, sir. Yeah, I'm exemplary. Well, that's what I was going to say, though, is that I purposely put myself in positions where I can be proximate. And as the Multicultural Awareness Group knows, I keep stumbling. And I stumble over cultural differences, left and right some days, but I'm learning. And it is changing me. Yes, I still have a whole lot of implicit bias, but I am getting better. And it's because I work with the immigrants, the immigrant community, because I have a transgender woman living in the house with me who is also Latina, and you know, her sister. I just wish that I knew more Spanish, because then I could really be proximate and learn a whole lot more. It's difficult when I don't know the language, and they don't know mine. We manage through Google Translate, but there's also a proposal that's coming down the pike that Las Cruces become a center for refugees. That we welcome refugees into this community, which I strongly support. They don't have to live with you, but if they're here and we have occasion to work with them in various ways, you're going to learn a whole lot. You know, I had a Muslim Pakistani live with me for 6 months. He's still praying for my soul, but because he was unable to convert me. But you know, I learned so much, and I learned customs, and I learned foods, and you know, it's just been a life expanding experience, and I encourage our congregation to embrace the idea of welcoming the refugees and working on that project, because we're going to expand our understanding, and we're going to show the love that is such a basic part of our faith.
Yes. Yeah.
I would extend XK's invitation to anyone who would like to share at this time that's sitting on something for us. Okay, then. Number 3, the third thing we can do at all cost, stay hopeful. Stay hopeful. Where there is no hope, there is despair. Hopelessness is the place of homelessness and all the other disparities Brian talked about. So the 4 things we can do to change his suffering is stay hopeful. Even when there's his word, there's that word, even when it gets complicated. I would add, especially when it gets complicated. And here's the other piece. You're not alone. You're not alone, especially if we belong to this community, beloved community, small b, developing all of that. But what's at risk for me to reach out and ask Maggie or ask Joel or ask someone about what I'm thinking or what I'm feeling? That, you know how you feel when somebody calls you and shares something with you that they might not share with any and everyone? How does that make you feel? Yeah. Make somebody feel like that. Make somebody feel like that. So be hopeful. Stay hopeful about creating justice even when it's complicated. And his last offering for us is be willing to do uncomfortable things, which is why I say MultiKulti is not safe space. It's a very safe space. Ain't nobody beating nobody up, and we're gonna maintain rigorous order and respect. But it's a brave, and it's a break. Tom, are you supposed to catch me on my butt? And it's a brave space. It's a space where we recognize this could be uncomfortable. Oh my God, not that. Uncomfortable. And thank you, Jan, for saying Muslim. That's a big one, y'all, if you didn't get that. They're not Muslims. All them other words you hear. Call them what they call themselves. That is immediate proximate. It's like throwing a fish line in the river with the guy next to you. Automatic connection. Y'all fishing. They're Muslims, like moo. So there's another one I want you to take away from you today. It's like moo, Muslims. Don't call them Muslims. Muslims. If you want to be proximate, just a little, call folks what they want. What do they call themselves? See, that might take a little effort. Okito. Be willing to do uncomfortable things. Now anybody got anything? I was going to ask Rodney to step in here now. And I had a little time for you, man, to speak to what you had spoke to and alluded to earlier in our conversations in preparation for this wonderful day. If you're still there.
Yeah, I'm here, sir.
Yeah.
I would just say that the 4 things that you just shared from Brian Stevenson are beginning for us to live into those questions about what beloved community looks like. So I would just invite more conversation about that. How can we apply those 4 paths toward building beloved community within our local context of a twice colonized New Mexico? And I'd like to listen.
Tell more, educate me when you use that term, twice colonized New Mexico. I know that, help me out, what that mean?
Okay, so what I mean by that
Yes.
is, what I mean by that is that New Mexico, along with most of the southwestern United States, including Arizona, which of course used to be part of the territory of New Mexico,
yes,
was first colonized by the Spanish Empire. And,
yes.
of course, that was not necessarily all quote unquote Spaniards. It was the Spanish colonial empire, the Spanish colonization by a multiracial group of people, really. And then in 1846, the United States went to war with Mexico. And so the United States became the colonizer from 1846 through to the present day. So how do we unpack all of that in terms of trying to build this beloved community? And I think what you're saying about listening is a huge part of it, and learning. And so that I would just ask people to share what their thoughts might be along those lines. Of course, I skipped over the fact that Mexico obtained independence from the colonizer, and yet in essence, it's kind of similar to our revolution here in the United States, where we claim to have broken loose from the colonizer, Great Britain or England, and yet became the colonizer as well. It wasn't like all of a sudden we turned over. It wasn't a revolution and the indigenous people got their lands back and the enslaved people were freed. It was a situation where there were new colonizers that just happened to be quote unquote homegrown. And so it's even more complex here because we've got two imperial powers, three if you include Mexico, that have meddled in the situation here.
You surprised me, Rod, because I thought that you were going to say that our colonization of the indigenous peoples was the first colonization. And then the second was when we colonized the Mexicans. But you went back to the Spaniards. So I'd say we were thrice colonized.
Yeah, right. And that's what I was saying. What I mean when I say twice colonized.
Yeah.
To me, that's the big I imperial powers that were doing the colonization, of which at least my political ancestors were a part.
I think that,
and I would argue remain a part.
I think you've raised a good issue that too few of us know the history of this area. We live here, but we see it from a white perspective, that this is our land, this is our home, this is where we are. And we don't know the history well enough. I had no idea until Elisa Sanchez did a roundtable that the extent of lynchings of Mexicans. Black people, sure, I know all about that, but Mexicans. And the deportation of American citizens because they had Spanish sounding last names.
I'd like to add too something interesting that I learned is that deep-seated racism against Hispanic culture, that it took 66 years and half a dozen attempts for the New Mexico territory to become a state. Way longer than any other state. Just, too highest Hispanic population or something. So.
Well, and I have to mention that there were times when I was in the military where I was asked, how did you get in the military if you are from Mexico? Because I live in New Mexico. I just wanted to ask Rod a question, because one of the things that triggers for me is that when you say and learn, I automatically go into my head. And I don't want to always be intellectual about this. I want it to be a real interpersonal experience and not just, oh, I've read about that, now I know. And so how do you suppose, or how do you propose that we will continue to learn?
I think we each learn differently. And I think that's, why this work begins at the personal, if I'm understanding what Reverend Anthony is preaching over there, and I appreciate it. We need to find our own ways to learn, perhaps. Mine is to dig into the books first and to listen to people. I mean, you can go on YouTube and hear Indigenous people relate their stories. You can hear people of Mexican heritage present their stories. That's a start. It's not the proximity that I need to get to. I do a little bit of that, a very small amount in my workplace pre-pandemic. So that I need to get out of the books too. Yet for me, I need to look at the books first and also explore what is being willingly shared on platforms like YouTube, where you can, Google most of this stuff, and there are people from these cultures that are sharing their own histories, and that's where I have an opportunity to listen. So that's what works for me. Does that resonate at all with anybody else?
Thank you.
I've got a thought. You said, and if we try to get proximate without trying to bring an agenda, that makes sense, because I don't think we should be in charge of deciding what help someone needs or what we think they need, which the book Waking Up White drove home very clearly to me, was that so many times we say, oh, they need to be exposed to, the orchestra. And we bus in kids from all over the Boston suburbs to be exposed to the orchestra because it's something we think is important to the culture. Okay. And she was saying that too often the groups that were doing this they planned and they executed and they evaluated and they never talked to the mostly minority groups that they were busing in and busing out. So here we are, and we don't have a ton of Black people in our area, but we do have a lot of Hispanic of some sort. There's a word I can't figure out yet. If you can help me with Muslim, maybe you can help me with Latinx. I don't think they even like that. What's the word? But anyway, there are a bunch of them, whatever we want to call them. And then I think Jan and I have talked a little bit because it seems like an obvious place where we could be present is be present in large numbers in dealing with this immigrant situation. I think there are clearly things that we could do in following the lead of other organizations. I don't know if we could follow the lead of what the immigrants tell us they want. That may be going too far, I don't know. But it's confusing to me when we say we want to do, because yes, I think going in and listening and learning, but there's got to be some action. I'm sorry, I'm a Unitarian. We got to be doing something besides listening. So I like to listen while I'm making dinner for, maybe, there, that's cool. But,
well, I'd like to piggyback on that, Susan. There's a great book that was published just recently. It was written by a man by the name of Wayne Hoffman, and it is he was a Presbyterian pastor who was so good at facilitating difficult conversations and getting somewhere that first churches wanted him all over the country to come be a facilitator, and next businesses wanted him to, and he actually ended up spending his life consulting with all kinds of religious groups and businesses and so forth. But the book is called Platinum Communication: Treating Other People the Way They Want to Be Treated, which completely flips the golden rule upside down. And, so he would say, the first thing you have to do is get to know your audience, get to know people. And so listening is an important part of it, but you also ask a lot of how questions and what questions, staying away from the why questions, because the why questions often sound like you are blaming people or shaming or putting, some kind of putting something on them. And, for me, in the work I do, I have an opportunity to see what happens when, and this is particularly Mexican American people, when they have suffered a lot of oppression, and when they are unhappy, concerned about things, they often turn in on each other as opposed to turning in on white folks, because turning in on white folks is really risky. And, I have seen some really tragic things happen. And so my brother, who happened to know Wayne Hoffman very well and helped with the editing of this book, sent this book to me. And, there are some tremendous ideas in there, some of which Reverend Anthony has been sharing today. But to treat people the way they want to be treated instead of the way we want to be treated, I think is an important concept. And if we want to really get to know how they want to be treated, we do have to ask some questions.
Thanks, Jane.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. And I want to, before that was golden, I want to address what you have something. I want to be quiet. I see a face there that sitting on something. Dick, you got something?
Well,
yes.
I've enjoyed being here, and it's always an interesting experience. And you learn things. Often you learn things you don't know you didn't know.
Most times.
Yeah, if you know you don't know something, then you can get past that easily enough. But it's the things you don't know that learning that you need to know something that you've never even thought of before can take some work.
3 most powerful words in the English language for me: I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And to be okay with that. And to say that to yourself sometimes, maybe several times, maybe many times. What does that feel like? And Susan, I know I wanted to address something you said about what folks, back to the Muslim thing, I said about what, if it's Latinx, Latin Y, Q, P, whatever, I'm putting it in quotation, they need or they want, I'm never going to be too, I have to listen. And excuse me, and folks who purport to know, it is really important, because for those of us, the big us, who have never had that problem, it seems kind of ridiculous to even, what do you want to be called? What? Chillax, because it's really important, and it's pretty much a given. Those who look like you, not you, those who look like you, there's a built-in 6,000-year tradition of power that is present anytime you show up. We know who you are. We know you. These guys that Sally, who was just speaking, boy, I'm crazy with my name. No, that Jane was just speaking about, they necessarily so. Oh, Jane, you hit me. We call it crabs in a barrel. Talk out of talk. What it's like to be a Black person, what you said, that has been my experience, like what you said about the Mexican Americans turning on one another. Yeah, the big I can do that with ease, and piece of cake. In fact, I brought up to always do that. Because like you say, messing with Susan, and Susan, I'm using you just not personally, but messing with Susan, that's another kettle of fish. I gotta think about that.
You know, I'm a woman, right?
I'd like to,
But we all, as Tamara said, that we all show up with our stuff. We all show up with whatever stuff we got. Yeah, Reverend, you got.
I wanted to call on Annetta Turrentine, because she's grown up in a multicultural environment. We talked about Europe. She's German American. I believe
No,
she
I'm not
identifies that
American.
way.
German.
What kind of American?
I'm not an American. I'm a German citizen.
German citizen living in America.
Yes.
She's not American. So you're not American. So speak about your experience as a German living in America.
Well, what can I say? You know, it's interesting, and all the time I have lived here. I have lived in New Mexico. I have not lived in any other part of the United States because I live here for the sunshine. Yeah, I have, you know, besides this variety of friends here in our church, I have a wide variety of friends that I have made here over the decades. And they are very multicultural. And not all of them are also not American. Let's throw that one in there. Well, since this is a university town, that, you know, that just happens. It just happened that way because I'm one of those people that, you know, at all kinds of occasions, I just start talking to people. So, yeah, but yeah, as in our little breakout group, yeah, I mentioned that, you know, growing up, I don't remember anybody talking about races, but one of the things I remembered being really pissed off about Americans in general, because, you know, at the time they were the enemy. So in any skin tone, they were equally kind of despised. But I got over that, obviously. Otherwise, I wouldn't be living here. And since I have moved here, one of my very close friends from Germany has also moved here. So, you know, it wasn't just me that got over it. So that guy lives now in Albuquerque. So
I'm thinking there's a special, but Germans have a different and their own unique brand of dealing with disparities coming out of the Holocaust. And I've heard people from Germany say that it's such a deep rooted pain, the atrocities committed by the Nazis, that it's one of the reasons that Germans have such a small military now. And I've even heard stories that the military is so is hated by people in Germany, that even the current military members are looked down upon by German citizens to this day as a result of the military.
Yeah, you never see anybody walking around in their uniforms outside of, you know, if they have to go somewhere. Yeah. We don't have any
I dare say
holidays for them or anything like that. No.
We're running out of time here.
Annette, I dare say, Annette, you created a new narrative.
I did?
Yes, you did. From despise to wherever, whatever word you would use now. you had a narrative and a story about Americans, right?
Wait, well, yeah, I mean, just because,
Just want to
you
honor
carry
that.
around a different passport, what the
Yes.
heck, I mean.
But that passport did not change your story. I want to give you an honoring here. You changed your story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
So somebody was asking, well, how do you change this? Talk to Annette. What did she go through to change? How did she go from despising to, I don't know, compromising? That's just the poet in me. I'm not saying that's what you did. But XK reminds us that we're coming to our time, and I have another final offering here, but I want to open it up for anybody who's sitting on anything, and we can go a little bit over, and that's okay. Okay. So my offering for all you folks is sometimes, I think Reverend XK mentioned that folks might feel, in my words, a little full. Enough of this already. It's multiculti this, and there's the BIPOC that, and it's the hoopty doopty this, Latinx, Latin Y, what the hell? So I have an offering. When you feel full, maybe frustrated and a little guilty, my offering is that the reason you feel full, if I can use a poetic illustration, I see that as a thimble. You're full because the thimble is full. Let's be a wine barrel. Let's be a wine barrel. Let's create some space for those feelings to mix with some other grapes. Yeah? Because the thimble is full because it's a thimble. That's why it's full. There's nothing wrong. It's just a thimble. We got what we got in this. No, let's relax and be open to that. And I want to, another thing came up about, back to Brian being proximate and all that. XK, you gave me a good one. Just go fishing. By that, I mean, go wherever stuff is happening with folks. What are they doing? You just go fishing. That affinity is built in. You aren't there to do anything. You're there to enjoy yourself, whatever that may be. Whatever that may be. Go fishing. Or when you find an organization and you know they're having an action, for my action, or they're having an action. Well, can I show up in support of that action? I'm not there necessarily to recruit, but I'll tell you, that's how I got recruited. The guy didn't recruit me, but he had a shirt on, says standing on the side of love. And we asked, what was that? Next thing you know, oh boy. But no, support the action, no mission, just be. And Tamara alluded to it. No, she said it out. She didn't say it. She was plain and clear. Love is the doctrine of this organization, church, congregation, fellowship. It's a love thing. It's about the intuitive, not the rational, though there's a place for both. Going back to where I began with my favorite shaman, my Uncle Albert, the intuitive mind is a sacred gift. The rational mind, as powerful as it is a servant. To servant. That intuitive mind. I don't know what it was about him, but I just didn't feel right. But he had that doctorate thing, so I went along with the program. The intuitive mind. What does it feel like? And that same intuitive mind, I feel like I want to go over there, but I don't want to, shut that down. Trust your gut. Go with the feeling is the offering. Just show up. And the other, whoever the other is, brought me other. There are two things I said I wanted to make sure I left you with. One was the concept of both and the other is intent or impact. You probably have heard this before, meaning when I go and I show up and something happens and it was not my intent to offend, it was not my intent for that to happen. Do not rely on your intent. Make your intent secondary to the impact that you've had on that person. Why are they angry? That's not what I meant. That impact of what I said or did, the anger, how that person felt, that becomes paramount. Why? Because I want to be in relationship with the other. Like I said, if you don't give a poop, that's fine. Carry on. And Jane, I'm sure your guy, Mr. Hoffman, got that in his book some kind of way, in some other order or something like that. But that's the power of the deal. Switch the scenario. No, it ain't about me. It's about thee. I said that, but she responded. I didn't mean to offend you. Keep that in my gut. Shut up. She's offended. How do I deal with that? Here's a revolutionary. I'm sorry. What happened to you is paramount. I'm going to let that lead our relationship. I'm going to put that power there because I want to be in relationship with the other. And the last other piece I say for us is to remember that all of this stuff we're talking about, we caught it. We caught it. We were taught it. And we bought it. Caught, taught, and bought. So it's not me. It's not you. It's what you were taught. It's what you caught. It's what you bought. And you still have to buy into it or teach it or unlearn it or let it go. Power rests not out there. The power rests in you and in me. And guess what, Susan? I'm going to get it wrong. I'm a human. That's how it glows, and that's how it goes. And here's the deal. That's okay. Got a little Arnold Schwarzenegger in me. I'll be back. I'll be back. I won't go away. Damn, she came back. She must be wanting to play or is interested, is worth a darn. Wow. So thank y'all so much for hanging out with me today. Thank you, Reverend XK, for the invitation. So I want to thank Reverend XK out loud. I want to thank Sarah for helping keep us straight, and for all the folks who are responsible for making this happen. Thank you. And most importantly, y'all. Thank you. So I do request some feedback. I haven't asked him yet, but I'm gonna ask that you email Reverend XK with any comments, criticisms, suggestions that you might have.
Maybe
so we
they
can
should
make this better.
email Shirley or Rod.
Okay, thank you for that.
About
Correct. I say I didn't ask him, so I did that. Shirley or Rod, let them know, please.
Thank you for coming.
You've got it, and I want to give a shout out and congratulations to you, Rev, for your new book, The Black UU Survival Guide.
Thank you.
Shout out for that. And I like to leave y'all with an old African proverb. It says, if you want to go quickly, go alone. But if you want to go far, let's go together. I don't know about you, but I want to go far. So let's go together. So until the next time, I'll say, oh, let me say, oh, we lit this booger at the beginning. It's been burning bright. So I extinguished this fire, but not the flame of commitment that it represents. So until we meet again, blessings.
Thank you, Reverend.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a great afternoon, everyone.
Thank you.
And this will
Bye.
be available on our
Have a great afternoon,
Thanks,
y'all.
Rev.
Peter.
Peace now.